Chapter 10 Where Angels Fear to Tread by E. M. Forster. Read for you by Julie Pandia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. To find out more or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Where Angels Fear to Tread. Chapter 10 "He will have to marry her," said Philip. "I heard from him this morning, just as we left Milan. He finds he has gone too far to back out. It would be expensive. I don't know how much he minds. Not as much as we supposed, I think. At all events, there's not a word of blame in the letter. I don't believe he even feels angry. I never was so completely forgiven. Ever since you stopped in killing me, it has been a vision of perfect friendship. He nursed me, he lied for me at the inquest, and at the funeral, though he was crying, he would have thought it was my son who had died. Certainly I was the only person he had to be kind to. He was so distressed not to make Harriet's acquaintance, and that he scarcely saw anything of you. In his letter he says so again. Thank him, please, when you write," said Miss Abbott, "and give him my kindest regards." "Indeed I will." He was surprised that she could slide away from the man so easily. For his own part, he was bound by ties of almost alarming intimacy. Gino had the southern knack of friendship. In the intervals of business he would pull out Philip's life, turn it inside out, remodel it, and advise him how to use it for the best. The sensation was pleasant, for he was a kind as well as a skilful operator. But Philip came away feeling that he had not a secret corner left. In that very letter Gino had again implored him, as a refuge from domestic difficulties, to marry Miss Abbott even if her dowry is small. And how Miss Abbott herself, after such tragic intercourse, could resume the conventions and send calm messages of esteem, was more than he could understand. "When will you see him again?" she asked. They were standing together in the corridor of the train, slowly ascending out of Italy towards the San Gothard tunnel. "I hope next spring. Perhaps we shall paint Siena red for a day or two with some of the new wife's money. It was one of the arguments for marrying her." "He has no heart," she said severely. "He does not really mind about the child at all." "No, you're wrong. He does. He is unhappy like the rest of us. But he doesn't try to keep up appearances as we do. He knows that the things that have made him happy once will probably make him happy again. He said he would never be happy again. In his passion, not when he was calm. We English say it when we are calm, when we do not really believe it any longer. Gino is not ashamed of inconsistency. It is one of the many things I like him for. Yes, I was wrong. That is so. He is much more honest with himself than I am," continued Philip, "and he is honest without an effort and without pride. But you, Miss Abbott, what about you? Will you be in Italy next spring?" "No." "I'm sorry. When will you come back, do you think?" "I think never." "For whatever reason?" He stared at her as if she were some monstrosity. "Because I understand the place. There is no need." "Understand Italy!" he exclaimed. "Perfectly." "Well, I don't. And I don't understand you," he murmured to himself as he paced away from her up the corridor. By this time he loved her very much, and he could not bear to be puzzled. He had reached love by the spiritual path. Her thoughts and her goodness and her nobility had moved him first, and now her whole body and all its gestures had become transfigured by them. The beauties that are called obvious, the beauties of her hair and her voice and her limbs, he had noticed these last. Gino, who never traversed any path at all, had commended them dispassionately to his friend. Why was he so puzzling? He had known so much about her once what she thought, how she felt, the reasons for her actions, and now he only knew that he loved her, and all the other knowledge seemed passing from him just as he needed it most. Why would she never come to Italy again? Why had she avoided himself and Gino ever since the evening that she had saved their lives? The train was nearly empty. Harriet slumbered in a compartment by herself. He must ask her these questions now, and he returned quickly to her down the corridor. She greeted him with a question of her own. "Are your plans decided?" "Yes, I can't live at Sawston." "Have you told Mrs. Herriton?" "I wrote from Monteriano. I tried to explain things, but she will never understand me. Her view will be that the affair is settled, sadly settled, since the baby is dead. Still it's over. Our family circle need be vexed no more. She won't even be angry with you. You see, you have done us no harm in the long run. Unless, of course, you talk about Harriet and make a scandal. So that is my plan London and work. What is yours?" "Poor Harriet," said Miss Abbott, As if I dare judge Harriet, or anybody." And without replying to Philip's question, she left him to visit the other invalid. Philip gazed after her mournfully, and then he looked mournfully out of the window at the decreasing streams. All the excitement was over. The inquest, Harriet's short illness, his own visit to the surgeon. He was convalescent both in body and spirit, but convalescence brought no joy. In the looking-glass at the end of the corridor he saw his face haggard and his shoulders pulled forward by the weight of the sling. Life was greater than he had supposed, but it was even less complete. He had seen the need for strenuous work and for righteousness, and now he saw what a very little way those things would go. "Is Harriet going to be all right?" he asked. Miss Abbott had come back to him. "She will soon be her old self," was the reply. For Harriet, after a short paroxysm of illness and remorse, was quickly returning to her normal state. She had been thoroughly upset, as she phrased it, but she soon ceased to realize that anything was wrong beyond the death of a poor little child. Already she spoke of "this unlucky accident," and "the mysterious frustration of one's attempts to make things better." Miss Abbott had seen that she was comfortable, and had given her a kind kiss. But she returned, feeling that Harriet, like her mother, considered the affair as settled. "I'm clear enough about Harriet's future, and about parts of my own. But I ask again, what about yours?" "Sawston and work," said Miss Abbott. "No." "Why not?" she asked, smiling. "You've seen too much. You've seen as much and done more than I have. Of course I shall go to Sawston." "You forget my father, and even if he wasn't there, I've 100 ties. My district I'm neglecting it shamefully. My evening classes, the St. James " "Silly nonsense!" he exploded, suddenly moved to have the whole thing out with her. "You're too good about 1,000 times better than I am. You can't live in that hole. You must go among people who can hope to understand you. I mind for myself. I want to see you often, again and again. Of course we shall meet whenever you come down, and I hope that it will mean often. It's not enough. It'll only be in the old horrible way, each with a dozen relatives round us. No, Miss Abbott, it's not good enough." "We can write, at all events." "You will write?" he cried, with a flush of pleasure. At times his hope seemed so solid. "I will indeed. But I say it's not enough. You can't go back to the old life if you wanted to. Too much has happened." "I know that," she said sadly. "Not only pain and sorrow, but wonderful things. That tower in the sunlight, do you remember it? And all you said to me? The theatre, even. And the next day in the church, and our times with Gino. All the wonderful things are over," she said. "That is just where it is." "I don't believe it. At all events, not for me. The most wonderful things may be to come." "The wonderful things are over," she repeated, and looked at him so mournfully that he dare not contradict her. The train was crawling up the last ascent towards the Campanile of Airolo and the entrance of the tunnel. "Miss Abbott," he murmured, speaking quickly, as if their free intercourse might soon be ended, "what is the matter with you? I thought I understood you, and I don't. All those 2 great first days at Monteriano I read you as clearly as you read me still. I saw why you had come, and why you changed sides, and afterwards I saw your wonderful courage and pity. And now you're frank with me one moment, as you used to be, and the next moment you shut me up. You see, I owe too much to you my life, and I don't know what besides. I won't stand it. You've gone too far to turn mysterious. I'll quote what you said to me. Don't be mysterious, there isn't the time. I'll quote something else. I and my life must be where I live. You can't live at Sawston." He had moved her at last. She whispered to herself hurriedly, "It is tempting." And those 3 words threw him into a tumult of joy. What was tempting to her? After all, was the greatest of things possible? Perhaps, after long estrangement, after much tragedy, the South had brought them together in the end. That laughter in the theatre, those silver stars in the purple sky, even the violets of a departed spring, all had helped, and sorrow had helped also, and so had tenderness to others. "It is tempting," she repeated, "not to be mysterious. I've wanted often to tell you, and then been afraid. I could never tell anyone else, certainly no woman, and I think you're the one man who might understand and not be disgusted." "Are you lonely?" he whispered. "Is it anything like that?" "Yes." The train seemed to shake him towards her. He was resolved that though a dozen people were looking, he would yet take her in his arms. "I'm terribly lonely, or I wouldn't speak. I think you must know already." Their faces were crimson, as if the same thought was surging through them both. Perhaps I do." He came close to her. "Perhaps